Maverick News, the antivirus program for your mind. And now, the Freedom Reporters.
Kevin Michalitzi will join us from Crimea to give us a broader perspective on the state of the war in Ukraine. The other night I was talking about the current situation over there, throwing out some numbers, some information, and Kevin has additional information that will help expand our understanding in a more meaningful way.
Maverick News. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Too late. Too late. Too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Kevin Michalitzi, welcome back, sir.
Rick, glad to be here as always.
I'm glad you could join us today. We're going to talk about this situation that unfolded in Avdeevka. I was talking about it the other night. I laid out some numbers and some information, that was available to us here, but you're going to bring us a deeper perspective on this and maybe something a little bit more accurate to give people a fuller view. Let's kind of roll things back to the beginning, first of all, and let's talk about how this current episode or how this battle began. We go back about, 5 months ago or so, right, when things really began, right?
Yeah. And it was, Ukraine and the West was saying it was going to be a decisive battle for Ukraine. It was, a stronghold. It was an important logistical spot for Ukraine to hang on to. Mm-hmm. And, much like the Bakhmut deal, the fight has been long and hard and slow. So, in the last, I'd say 4 or 5 weeks, Russia really started making pushes into that area. And what they did is they surrounded the city on 3 sides and started to close off the 4th side. And, that's where we were just the end of last week.
Right. And that was their strategy, was to try to encircle the Ukrainian troops in the city, right? And,
yes.
Yeah.
And the Ukrainian government, Zelensky had ordered the troops to hold the city at all costs. And they were going to fortify themselves in the coke plant. And again, trying to make it another Bakhmut, and, the Azov battalion hiding in the, the steel factory. And, it just didn't work out for them.
Right. Why was this city important strategically?
It wasn't.
Okay.
This is a city where Zheluny, the previous commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, he wanted to withdraw his troops and conserve his troops for defensive lines back in, December, January. And Zelensky would not allow him to withdraw the troops. So, that really, it was a PR thing is what it really was for. Is, we can show the West we need money from them, we need more weapons, but that we can win this war. And unfortunately, this is what happens when you have a politician not listening to his, senior military advisors. So, they fired Zheluny, a couple of weeks ago, put this new guy in. His name always slips my mind, but, this was after Victoria Nuland flew to Ukraine to settle the dispute between Zaluni and Zelensky. And, rumors have it that she said, Zaluni, you will step aside and this new guy will be put in. And, and this is what happened then immediately after she left. So the new guy is supposedly a yes man for Zelensky. Zelensky told him to hold that city at all costs. And
there was some symbolic significance to the city, I think, though, because of its the history, the recent history in terms of the way this whole conflict began, right, with the situation in the Donbass and what the West would characterize as separatists, the sort of, they've been jockeying for control over that town from the beginning.
Yeah,
all the way back to 2014.
The big thing about Avdeevka is it's where they were shelling the city of Donetsk from.
Right.
So, what it buys for the Russians is security for the city of Donetsk.
Yeah, and it's been a meat grinder from what I've been reading, seeing, hearing, right from the beginning. Pretty heavy losses on both sides, really.
Both sides, yeah.
Yeah. So,
and, as usual, you get the propaganda on both sides. Ukraine says, oh, gee, we lost, 10,000 guys and Russia lost 300,000. Russia says, we lost 10,000. They lost 300,000. So you have to look beyond that. From the guys that I talked to that are on the front, both sides suffered losses. So,
yeah. The numbers that I've been seeing here indicate that on the Russian side, you're looking at somewhere around 16,000 to 17,000 soldiers killed. That information coming from multiple sources, really, including this online blogger, Andrei Morozov, who's a pro-Russian blogger, has actually fought with Russian troops. And but he was posting online talking about these losses, and then came under heavy criticism from his commanders and others. Apparently, strangely, today we're seeing reports that he has committed suicide.
Yeah. 3 bullets to the back of the head.
Well, maybe
suicide.
Yeah, maybe. But I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that estimate of casualties? 16,000, 17,000. I'm seeing it in many mainstream reports. He was saying about that many. And I'm not really clear how many Ukrainian troops were lost. I can't really get a handle on those numbers. Maybe because they don't want us to see that number over here.
Yeah, the Russian number sounds about right. This is what I'm hearing from guys up on the front. Believe it or not, we actually do get relatively accurate numbers about losses of Ukrainian troops. And it tends to be, 1,000, 1,200 today, 500, 600 the next day. So if you add it all up, you're probably talking, 30,000, 40,000 troops. Now, you have to add into that the fact that a lot of the troops that, particularly from Avdeevka, were surrendering to Russia. So they've taken a significant amount of people who've surrendered. And some of these guys have even joined the Russian armed forces to fight against Ukraine, because they say the way they were treated by their military and their commanders, they were, counting their bullets, is how bad their ammunition supply was.
That is the issue that was cited by Zelensky when he was just, again, within the last few days, begging for more money, more aid, more weapons. And the commanders there, I guess, indicated that they simply didn't have enough shells, enough resources to carry on the fight. How much? Yeah. So do you think that was the significant factor in the final conclusion on this?
I think there's a lot of factors in it. Lack of weapons, lack of training on the weapons, lack of experienced soldiers. These guys aren't getting a lot of training these days. They're being conscripted. They're having a gun shoved in their hands, maybe get a week or two of training, and then thrown out on the front line.
Yeah,
so it's
and
not
outnumbered
good for
too.
the Ukrainians.
Outnumbered.
Well
The Russians have way
outnumbered, yeah.
more. Yeah, I've been seeing that at times they were outnumbered as much as 7-1.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't give you an exact number on that, but we've got 50,000 people a month volunteering to go fight.
And the warfare that they were engaged in really was a meat grinder again, and we've seen this.
Yeah.
We saw it in Bakhmut. We've seen it elsewhere, and I understand that one of the strategies that they ended up using, one of the things that the Russians did was they accessed drainage tunnels and dug additional tunnels to get in behind the Ukrainian troops. They came up on the other side, and then that's one of the things that allowed them to help, get them closer to encircling the city.
Yep. Yeah, and then they stuck to the forests on the north and south side, and that was high ground, so they could shoot down on the guys. So a lot of good tactics by the guys. Now, they will tell you, if you talk to the guys on the front, they got a lot of fire back. The Ukrainians fought hard and valiantly. And these guys will say that. So it isn't, you hear a lot of, you see in this news report that, the Russians are bad-mouthing the Ukrainians and things like that. And it isn't that way. These guys fight hard, but the Russian forces also understand that they're better equipped and better trained. And these guys are just young guys, old guys. The most experienced guys were still the Azov battalion, which this new general ordered to go in on the last day to help hold the city. And the Azov battalion actually refused to go in. They said, it's a meat grinder. It isn't a city that's worth saving for us, and we refuse to go in and fight. So they disobeyed orders of their commander-in-chief. Now, this is part of the reason why the city was withdrawn from. And I use the term withdrawn loosely because this general did not make the decision to withdraw his troops until they had already fled the city. So they only had one way out. It was a field. All the roads were already captured. And the men earlier in the day on the Ukrainian side started fleeing through the fields to save their lives. And they left weapons behind, and they're wounded because they just had no way to take it out of the city. So all these men were fleeing. The Azov battalion was refusing to come in to defend the city. So, well into the night, this general said, oh yeah, I've made the decision, I'm going to withdraw my troops. Well, they had already self-withdrawn. So he did it supposedly against the orders of Zelensky. He couldn't contact Zelensky because Zelensky was in Germany begging for, money and weapons. And he had been given the order by Zelensky not to leave the city. And, his guys basically didn't give him any choice. So he announced that he was withdrawing them, even though they were already gone.
My understanding is that one of the reasons the Russians sustained the losses they did is because they needed to, especially in the last month, sort of send waves of soldiers in and engage ultimately in, street to street, building to building combat. And because they were on the offensive, they were left in a more vulnerable position, so they sustained some pretty heavy losses in what was very fierce fighting.
Well, yeah. It was the same thing with the street-to-street fighting in Mariupol, Bakhmut, so this is what happens when you do, house-to-house, street-to-street fighting.
Well, tragic all the way around, and I just wish we could get to an end of this thing so that the bloodshed would end. But
Yeah.
it looks like it's far from over. I mean, it looks like they'll at some point approve this additional. I think it's 95 billion in funding on the U.S. side. I see that eventually happening, but we're seeing delays with it. That's having some impact. But once that funding is approved and these additional munitions, the money, the arms, once that starts to flow again, I'd say it's kind of a reset of sorts, and then go again. Any thoughts on that money and the funding?
I saw a press briefing by the spokeswoman for the Department of Defense in the United States. I don't know if it was yesterday or today. It comes in so quickly. And she was answering a reporter's question about how long, when this money is approved, it would take them to be able to start supplying again. And she said 2 to 3 months. And, I don't know if Ukraine has 2 to 3 months. Russia is moving quickly through Ukraine at the moment. They have so many men on different fronts now, and they've taken 2-3 cities beyond Avdeevka now, and they did have one area that Ukraine took back today, but they're making significant advances.
So right now, time is on. Well, I don't know. On how do you how do you say,
it's not on Ukraine's side,
right? That's
now.
not. Yeah, that's right. So Russia's.
But it's war. It can change on a moment's notice.
Yeah, that's very true. And if that funding is approved, I'm seeing reports that the U.S. wants to send, get this, 1 million drones to Ukraine. 1 million.
Yeah, but what kind of drones?
I don't know.
Suicide bomb drones, or these little, ones, or who knows?
Yeah, and then yesterday we ran this story here in Canada about Canada sending over 800. That alone is $95 million. But when I looked at those drones, that's over $100,000 a piece. And I'm like, that looks like stuff you can build at home with parts that you order on the internet. In fact, I'm certain that you could do that. So that blew my mind.
Well, it's those $600 hammers and $600 toilet seats.
Yeah.
You got to keep Lloyd Austin rich.
Yeah. So I don't know how far the 95 billion will go when you're paying that kind of money for consumer grade drones. I just don't know, man. It seems like somebody's getting rich off this. In fact, it doesn't seem like it. It's so obvious that some people are really getting rich.
Yeah. Well, I talked to the First Minister of Information in the Donetsk People's Republic on Saturday. Had him on my show, and he was telling me that, sure, these big drones are used for a massive attack here or there, sinking a Russian ship in the Black Sea, things like that. But where the real damage is coming and the real local intelligence is coming is from these little $100 commercial drones.
Yeah. I gave an assessment the other night, and I'll get you to comment on it. This is from a layman's perspective. I think that both sides are tired of it. I think that Putin, even in his interview with Tucker Carlson, sort of saying, well, not sort of saying, he is saying, let's talk peace. I think he wants this thing to end. I think he's tired of it. I think both sides are suffering from a degree of fatigue here, just tired of the whole thing. I think that people here in the West are still pushing for their own reasons to keep it going. but I think Putin would like it to end. I think that he basically has what he wants. I don't think he wants to control the entire country. I don't
He
think he
does
really,
not.
and I don't think he really wants to have to go further. He will, but I think he would like it to end. And I think even the Ukrainians would like it to end. But on, at the same time, I don't think it's going so smoothly for Russia. I think one of the reasons that he wants to talk peace is because it's costing Russia soldiers and resources and a lot of money too. I think he'd just like it to end because he just doesn't want to have to put anything more into it. But he's doing what he has to do at this point because they're so committed. What are your thoughts on the path to peace?
You know, he wanted it to end in March of 2022, a month after it started. It was, a look, I can come in, I can do this the hard way, or you can follow the Minsk agreements, let Lugansk and Donetsk have autonomy and, create their own rules, what language they're going to speak, things like that, and we'll leave. And, the West screwed that up. Now, quite honestly, there's this talk of, well, maybe they should give Crimea back. That's never going to happen. So any peace deal they talk is going to have to include Russia gets Crimea. And Putin is not going to give up on the Lugansk, the Donetsk, the Kherson, none of those regions that they currently occupy, but further, he wants those whole territories. He wants those whole oblasts because he considers the halves of like the Donetsk oblast that Russia still or that Ukraine still holds. He considers that occupied territory. So he wants those whole oblasts. Now, would he be willing to negotiate and let loose of them? I would say probably, but he's not going to give up what he already has.
Yeah, it seems to me now is the time to end this.
And
because
he's negotiating from a point of power at this point.
And I think, the other reason I think this is the optimal time to bring this to a conclusion and get to a place of peace is because I think he has what he wants. And I think I think honestly, the West could live with the current situation and have some of it, but not all of it, and sort of have it half and half, right? It ends up being a compromise that they could have reached maybe politically or some other political solution, but instead we have a lot of dead people.
Well, if we only had some diplomats left in the Western countries.
Yeah, instead
you look at Germany and France and the United States, Canada, there's just no diplomats left.
It's very true. It's very true. And it's obstinate. They're just obstinate. They are arrogant. They, grossly overconfident. They thought they could just, push in politically into Ukraine without real consequence and really kind of poke a finger in the eye of the bear. And they found out otherwise. They certainly did.
Don't poke a stick at a sleeping bear.
Yeah. That never had to happen. Said that from the beginning. Unfortunately, it did. And then, you can get into the political talk on this, but it doesn't matter. Because we have a lot of blood that didn't have to be spilled, in my view.
Yeah. Something I was talking to Lori the other couple of nights ago, and she said you guys weren't hearing this in the West, but there's actually a Ukrainian underground partisans that are fighting on the side of Russia. And it started right around the 1st of February. They burned down a warehouse with volunteer aid and supplies for the armed forces of Ukraine. And that was in the Odessa region. I've heard of you know, up around Kharkiv, they had some guys poisoning the Ukrainian soldiers with alcohol, self-made alcohol that they, added poison to. 100 liters a month they were supplying. And, here's the story. So this weekend, this group derailed a train coming from Romania filled with 155 millimeter shells destined for the front and missiles destined for the Ukrainian front lines. They derailed and destroyed the train. And then on the 18th, which was Sunday, they actually burned down a drone manufacturing plant in Western Ukraine as well.
Yeah, no information about that over here at all. Not a peep.
Yeah.
Nothing. So
yeah, the site you were showing, I sent you the links. They, I've actually verified the information with the guys over here. So it is real stuff.
So these sources here, this is Southfront.press, it's called.
Yep. And Southfront is an independent news agency. They're kind of like Maverick News. They're truth seekers. They tend to be fairly reliable. Like anything.
Well, then they're not like us because we're 100% reliable.
Well, yeah.
We try to be anyway.
I'll just say that I don't take anything they say without verifying it elsewhere first.
Right. Yeah, very important.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was not familiar with these news sources at all. So this is all new to me. I'll check them out from time to time to see what they have to say. And it looks like they are pretty thorough with their pictures and the little clips of the video. So it looks like they're following stuff. And then I know, Kevin, that you have excellent sources in various places that feed you very reliable information, and that's why it's so valuable to have you on the program. Which is also why I need to ask you about the situation with the Russian Black Sea Fleet, because I was reporting the other day that as much as 20% of it had been reported disabled or lost. So the Russian Navy suffering some losses there that were, I think, surprising in number. When I went online and was just looking at the losses on both sides, on the naval side of things, I was amazed to see how active the battle had been on the water.
Yeah, well, yes and no. It was active in the very beginning, particularly in the Azov Sea. So 20% would be 10 out of the 50 ships in the Black Sea Fleet, or what was in the Black Sea Fleet, we should say at this point. So 20% is a pretty accurate number. So I have found the actual numbers on this, and Russia has lost 10 ships, but that is 5 surface vessels and 5 auxiliary support vessels. And some of those vessels that they have lost were actually Ukrainian ships that they salvaged when the Ukrainian Navy sunk them. So when the conflict started in the Azov Sea, they sank 13 ships in the Azov Sea, and Russia brought them back out, refurbished them, put them back into service in the Black Sea Fleet. So total, Russia had 68 ships that they were using, or 63 ships, sorry. So 20% would be 13, including the Ukrainian ships they were using. So 10 is about 20% of their original fleet. Now, Ukraine is reporting, I think you sent me what you were getting over there, that they've destroyed a third of Russia's navy. And, a third of the Black Sea Fleet. They're claiming 18 ships sunk. And this is not the Ukrainian Navy that is putting these numbers out there that the West is picking up on and reporting. This is, a guy in the Ukrainian Navy or a Ukrainian news source. The official Ukrainian numbers are 15 ships were destroyed in combat, with 13 captured, including the ones that they sunk and were reclaimed. So, they're claiming 18. The actual number is 9 on Russia's side, including support ships, and 15 on Ukraine's side. And the support ships are, tugboats. Russia lost a tugboat. They lost 3 patrol boats and 1 assault craft. So as far as large ships, they've lost, they've lost a cruiser, 3 patrol boats, 1 command ship, a couple of landing ships, and the tugboat. Ukraine, on the other hand, has lost a frigate, a corvette, a couple of patrol boats, 6 gunboats, 1 assault boat. And that number, I know, is not correct. These are official Ukrainian and Russian numbers. So the 1 assault boat and craft, I know isn't true, because they have been attacking Crimea using these assault crafts. Basically, they're U.S.-built speedboats. And, they put 5-6 guys in it, then they speed towards the shore, and, Russia's launching helicopters out that shoot them down in the water. So I know these numbers are not accurate on the Ukrainian side. The Russian side, I can't really speak for, but these are the official numbers from the Russian Navy and the Ukrainian Navy. So the toll stands at 10 and 15 officially.
The other thing that I've seen in the last 2 days is a report that the U.S. is, and that the headline was, the U.S. is leaning toward sending longer range missiles to Ukraine to use in the HIMARS systems. And if that happens, that would give Ukraine the ability to strike further into the Crimea area. This is worrisome to me, because when they first sent those HIMARS systems to Ukraine, they only provided the shorter range munitions. And I remember that Ukraine was told, you are not allowed to use these to strike into Russian territory. I remember that very, very clearly. Now It seems like the U.S. position, the NATO position on it, is shifting, and it's further escalation. And I would like your thoughts on that, because while it might not represent a Cuban Missile Crisis existential style threat to Russia, it does suggest to me that we're getting into even more dangerous territory.
Well, keep in mind that the reason the West doesn't prevent them from using them against Crimea is because they consider Crimea Ukraine.
Right.
So the attitude is, well, they can strike Crimea all they want because it's their own territory. Now, I had this discussion with somebody just a couple of days ago, about the strike further into Crimea. Reality is the U.S. has been supplying the medium-range missiles already. Those missiles can reach everywhere in Crimea, with the exception of the city of Yalta, one city in Crimea. So the only thing it will buy them with longer-range missiles is hitting the city of Yalta. So is one city going to make a difference? Not really. It means they can shoot further out into the sea. But, can you use those ATACMS missiles to hit a ship out in the middle of the sea? They've claimed they've done it in the past, but it's been disproven. So it's the sea drones that they hit ships with. So I think is what it's going to do is it is going to escalate more on mainland Russia. They've been forbidden from using these weapons on Russian territory, but they have been anyway. And you don't see the United States scolding them for it. They just ship them more.
Yeah.
Belgorod is constantly shelled with these missiles.
I wanted to ask you too, and this goes back to the Tucker Carlson thing, and maybe you know about this, maybe you don't. This is out of the blue. Right after the Tucker Carlson interview with Putin, there were reports over here of big fires in Moscow. And I didn't report on it because I couldn't verify it. It looked to me like it could just be fake news, propaganda. Did you hear anything about these fires in Moscow the night of the Tucker Carlson Putin interview? It just seemed like it was. I don't know.
It was fake. Have there been big fires in the Moscow region? Yeah. They had a wild berries warehouse. It's like an Amazon warehouse burned down. 50,000 square meters, big warehouse. You never do get a clear report of what caused these fires. Anytime there's one of these big fires, it's always, well, somebody was smoking where they weren't supposed to be, or they weren't following safety procedures. I think there's more to it. I think it is probably Ukrainian cells operating throughout Russia. So there have been some of these big fires. After the Tucker Carlson interview, no, absolutely not. The last one they had up there was this warehouse. They had an apartment building that burned not too long ago, but that was, somebody, blew up their kitchen with their gas line, probably heating their home with their stove, which is very common here. I had to break my wife of that habit, years ago.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. That's why I didn't report on it. It is so hard, though. It's becoming so difficult to separate fact from fiction online right now. I'm trying to be. I'm 10 times more careful than I ever was before in vetting information, and yet I still get duped once in a while. I thought that Back to the Future trailer for Back to the Future 4 was real, and it's just a fan tribute thing. So it fooled me. So easy to get fooled. But when I'm wrong, and I admit it. What about the reports of NATO troops? Any more talk about that over there? NATO troops like actually being used, posing as mercenaries, but they're actually NATO troops. And is there more talk about that? Because that also is obviously a concern. If NATO troops are actually engaged in the battle, then we have a bit of a different situation on our hands.
yeah, I mean, they've got large groups of foreign mercenaries in Ukraine fighting for Ukraine. So, that's a big news story here when they blow up one of the hotels that they're staying in, or, one of their command posts, something like that. So they do show, this is where they were. They show the passports. So, and they show the patches off of the shoulders. So this is real. They have soldiers from France, the United States, Germany, a bunch of different places.
Yeah.
But technically they're mercenaries because they aren't there under their country's uniforms. They wear Ukrainian uniforms with their flags on it. So it's the Ukrainian Foreign Legion. But they also have them in Russia fighting for Russia. So, if you want citizenship, Rick, in Russia, You can come over here, you can volunteer to fight on the front line, and they'll make you a citizen.
Well, it's tempting, but I'm not really a big fan of war, so it's not my first choice.
Yeah, I figured out that, you know, most people that want to take a deal like that, they don't realize that they shoot back at you.
Yeah, yeah. Yep. That's the problem. Well, it's
Yeah.
not just the problem. I don't want to go shoot at anybody anyway.
I
That's-
agree.
That's me. Kevin, is there anything else you'd like to add today or think that we might be missing?
No, I think that pretty much covers it for a quick update.
Really appreciate you helping us get a proper perspective on this. It's always difficult because we get certain kinds of information flowing over here and you get your information over there. And when we put it all together, I think it gives people a more complete and more accurate picture that gets us closer to the truth. One more time, tell people how they can find your work.
You can find me at this YouTube channel down here. I do propaganda stuff there. If you want to hear about life in Crimea and you know what it's like to live here, you can find me at on YouTube at American Crimea.
And when you say you do propaganda stuff, what you mean is you look at propaganda. You don't
I
create
look at it
propaganda.
and I expose it. Yes. As a guy who used to do propaganda, I expose propaganda. Yeah.
All right. Kevin Michelizzi, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you, Rick.
Maverick News. The world is watching.